Hi, this is Arlene Peck. Welcome you to my show, Wow, it's Arlene Peck. Today, I love it, love it, love it, as usual, because I have a really fun guest today. She's been on before. Her husband, Steve Allen, has been on many, many times, and I'm going to start kidnapping her more so I can have her on as many times as Steve Allen was on my show. But today, she has a mission to talk to you about today, because I'll tell all the things you did when I get into it. But I've got Ben Alba, too, he's a practicing trial lawyer writer who has written a book about Steve and all the interviews he did, which we'll get into how this happened. He's got a great background. And it started, though, in 1957, I think, when Ben was interviewing Steve about something he had done. Was it 57? You could tell me. No,
well, I actually, it was a little bit later than that, because I just was born in 57.
Exactly. Yeah.
But it was back in 1997, and it actually started, all began with...
The Tonight Show in 57.
Tonight Show in 57.
Gotcha.
But it actually began with one of America's greatest voices, Andy Williams, and I had opportunities to do some freelance writing projects for him during my previous career as a litigation lawyer, and I had written some CD liner notes and things like that, and I was really very interested in his early career, and that led to an opportunity to meet Steve back in April of 1997. Steve hired Andy back in 1954 to be one of the first regular singers on the original Tonight Show that he hosted. And
but let me interrupt you, because there's a lot of younger type people here who think that Jay Leno was, forever. And, and before that, there's a few older people than that think it was, Johnny Carson. But the originator of the Tonight Show was Steve Allen. And unfortunately, unfortunately, all those treasures, those absolute treasures of the tapes and the films and other things that went along with that were lost. They didn't keep copies, or they got whatever.
Well, a number of the directors of that era were telling me, including Dwight Hemian, who I interview in the book, was saying that the kinescopes of those early shows, they were rather disposable. It was a rather disposable era, and the networks never really thought to preserve that type of treasure and that legacy. When you have Carl Sandburg and you have Jackie Robinson and Richard Rodgers doing these wonderful shows with Steve, and it was just such a pity. And when I got to talking with Steve back in '97, and you could see not only how proud he was of the work that he had done, but how stricken he was by the fact that so little of that work exists on video. And that's when I came up with the idea of this story needs to be told, because at that time all I knew was that he was the first host of the show, but I didn't know that he had anything to do with inventing that type of format.
And so you went around and you met with the Steve and Edie's, and which incidentally another story, right? He was the how many songs did he write? Incidentally, he wrote the song to my show.
Really?
Yes. You didn't know that?
No.
Yes, I remember. He was on a show one time, and he said I really needed to get a good opening. And I says, great, write me one. And so he wrote me a song, and I felt like elevator music. It was just not me. It was too calm. And so I I called up, and I said, Steve, I just want to tell you, I said, I really appreciate you writing me this song. I said, but you need something more from me. And so the song here, this opening, he sent it over, and I got this opening, and sure enough, it's a song I've been using till I give him credit. The only credit I give on my show is song written especially for Arlene, by Steve Allen.
Well, he wrote over 9,000 songs. He was in the Guinness Book of World Records, and I think your theme song is what, number 6,087, was that right?
I'm going to carry you around with me, because I was married to him almost 50 years, and I don't know what this young man knows. He's a walking, you are an encyclopedia of Steve Allen.
Well, every time Steve would have a book of which I said he would sit down, and he would write a book almost while he's sitting waiting for them, with how long we waited today to get set up and everything. He'd be talking that little thing, and I said, it's so rude, and he'd be talking, and I said he probably wrote a book, half a book would be just waiting, and, talking in there. And when he'd have a book, he would come on the show and we would talk about it, and he was so accessible. I mean, he really was. And
That's one thing I really admired about him, was that I think his philosophy, and I'm sure Jane would agree, was never waste a minute. And that has been such an inspiration to me when I could think of things that I would like to accomplish. And I'm so grateful to both Steve during the early years when I was putting this together, as well as to Jane.
well, he was like a one-arm paper hanger. I see he stayed busier than a one-arm paper hanger. He was just, I mean, unbelievable. And, you know, it's so funny because so many years I've been trying to kidnap you in the show because Jane's background, you did so many things with Steve.
Yeah.
You did, besides the fact on your own, I mean, you wrote for Spelling, you did, was it Touched by an Angel? You wrote our original shows. You did a show, Fantasy Island, you know, you wrote.
Yeah.
But besides being in a lot of books that have been about you. But I remember when I would read these books, and in the books he would have Jane and I mean, they were about stories about you, but they were mysteries.
Yeah, the mysteries, yeah. But you know, when I read Ben's book about The Tonight Show, now remember, I'm the wife. I was there opening night. There are things in there, Arlene, I never knew. And it was so thrilling to me, aside from laughing and the memories and the
well, I have to
history.
show you brought me some pictures. We can show some of the pictures because run a couple of the pictures. I want to you know, show you some of the things you can say, you know, over who they are. Go ahead, run them. Okay, we'll run it when he gets around to it.
We'll see him in a minute.
Yes.
Yeah.
And when we were showing these things before, we were talking from the first shows they did. Run the pictures. I want to show them.
It was really very exciting for me. I would love to see the pictures if they get around to showing them, because
there. Okay, there's say there, Bill Cullen.
well, I've Got a Secret.
I've got it. That's you.
Gary Moore, Henry Morgan, and Faye Emerson. And now that's what I mean by history. You see, they're all gone.
Every one of them.
Every one of them.
Faye Emerson, I remember she was so outrageous because she wore a low-cut dress. I mean, today they're running around in thongs. You know, and there you are.
There's a shot right on the Tonight Show set, and that's a picture in the book.
Now, I can't see that far.
That's
Who is it?
Ernie Borgnine.
Oh, darling Ernie, but who's the man on the other side?
Your husband.
Oh!
And you.
That'll tell you.
See, just ask me anything and I'll tell you that.
That was you and Steve on, what was that on? That was you and Steve
that's on his show, on Steve's show, and
Steve
I'm
Allen's show.
obviously had just done a dance or a song. I don't know, we were performing.
That's a lovely shot.
Okay, and that was you.
That was taken for the cover of a magazine.
You know, you did so many plays together. I mean, it was like Love Letters I saw you in.
Yeah.
Oh, speaking of memories of stories, you know, and you mentioned before we were talking about your sister, who I don't know if, you know, a lot of people remember, but your sister was a wonderful actress.
She was Alice.
And she was
the
Alice.
Gleason Show.
And now I understand that. What is your opinion of well, your sister's name was what? Audrey Meadows.
Yes.
Just slipped my head. But didn't they make a movie of the
You mean
Honeymooners?
recently on?
The
I
Honeymooners.
haven't seen that movie.
I heard it was a black version.
Yes,
Which is going to be very interesting to see how this is. But Jackie Gleason, from what I had heard, which would be such a bizarre thing, was such a racist, I was told.
No.
Well, somebody here on the set told me that.
Oh,
did you know that?
I didn't know that.
No, well, I don't know. Maybe you weren't black and they didn't tell you, but I heard this from actually from people here.
I find it hard to believe he was. He wasn't that stupid. He was a good, kind man who would have been the last person in the world to be so stupid.
Well, the only reason I brought this up because when I came to the studio today and they said you were coming, someone here at the studio told me to ask you about that, which I'll ask him later. But there's so many other, you know, besides, I'm saying the books that you've got, you know, coming out, there's so many books that have been written about you, you know, and I mean, what a legacy, just what a legacy you have in your family. You've got just so much to be proud of.
And now, darling, I have the grandchildren. 2 or 3 of them are great musicians. One of them, who starts at Yale this fall, he is a clone of Steve.
Really? You told me about him years ago. You told me about him.
Yes, and he is so like Steve, Ben, that when I think he's read every book Steve ever wrote, and at Steve's funeral, he cried harder than anybody. I had to hold him in the church, literally hold him physically. Steve had a quality, aside from his craziness, you know, really, The Tonight Show, when you think, that book, and why I loved that book so much, it brought back my whole romance, because we weren't married when he first...
But you know, when you first, now you've told me this story years ago. I mean, it's a very romantic story you have about you and Steve.
Yeah.
When you first met, tell that story. It's a great story.
Well, I met him through Audrey.
Yeah.
And I had just done my first I've Got a Secret. And Audrey said, meet me and a group of friends afterwards for something to eat. And I said, oh, no, I'll be too nervous. I didn't even own a TV set because I lived in Hollywood and I was in the movies. And TV was a dirty word in those days, you see, in Hollywood.
Yeah.
And after I finished the first show, the producers, Mark Goodson, asked me to sign a contract for 7 years. He said, oh, we like you. And I thought, I've got to go tell Audrey we will at least eat for the next 7 years. So I went to the restaurant, and I had been there maybe 15 minutes when suddenly I saw him. And I've got bad eyesight. I was in love with him the minute he walked through the door, and I knew I was going to marry him someday.
Well, you said that. You said
in my mind, I knew it.
I'm going to marry that man.
Yeah, I'm going to marry that. If he's not married, I'm going to marry that man.
Yeah.
And he sat down at the table because he was planning to meet this group that Audrey was with. There was only one empty chair, and it was next to me. And he sat down, and I don't know if I ever told you this story, Ben, but he never said one word to me all night long. He talked to everybody.
You mentioned that.
Did I tell you that?
You did, uh-huh.
He talked to everybody at the table but me. And the first date he took me on, he took me to the planetarium, and he said, other men have taken you to the Stork Club, but I took you to the moon.
I think you told him at the end of that dinner, either you're the rudest man I've ever met or the shyest one.
Oh, what a memory. What a memory he's got. I did. Mm-hmm. I was so crazy about him right away. I said, Mr. Allen, you're either the rudest man I've ever met or the shyest. And
well, you know, he had a very interesting personality because he was such a genius.
Yeah.
And he wasn't, you know, this outspoken,
no.
boom, here I am. He was very, and you're a much easier
person
to interview.
Yeah.
You're so much easier because you come out and you've got stories, and you know we were saying how much
gregarious
the energy both you and I have, but very similar in our energies and our personalities.
Well, you know June Foray, the great voice of Rocky the Squirrel, and I had a chance to interview her. She was one of Jane's dear friends, and I always remember her saying, in one of the chapters in the book, she says that Steve's talent just opposed his nature. She had that opportunity to work with him back in the 40s.
It's totally true, and I remember he would be, and I think he was so used to people saying, and here's Steve, and so, you know, it's like with my show, I don't mean to interrupt, you know, and Steve didn't expect, because Steve was one of the politest men I think I've ever known.
Yeah, very polite, a gentleman, and very shy.
And so the combination with my personality, to get along, I'm saying, because, you know, it's a different thing. But on the show, it was difficult because I would if a thought would come in my head and boom, I'd blurt it out, and he would sit there and he would cross his legs and he'd put his arms like this and he'd give you that look. And I'm thinking, oh God, I interrupted him. And, you know, and I would get phone calls later or you know, messages from, how could you interrupt?
Oh, did you get those too?
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Because I was rude to him, they thought.
Well, when Steve and I would be on programs together, people would write to me and say, give him a break. Let the genius talk. Oh, yeah. But you know, Phil Silvers said, Steve, you're the only performer I know who is more relaxed on a stage than in a living room.
Is that right?
Oh, and it was true. He was the most creative, and to come at the time that he did, you see, into television, when there were no books telling us what to do or how to do it. It was all jazz. I think one of the beautiful things written when Steve left us was Larry Gelbart, who said everything Steve did was jazz. And when you think of jazz, it's all improvisation, you see.
Well, his hands are like magic. And we would talk, too, about how the troubles that happen in our world, when the melody went out of music. Because in those days, it was sweet, it was nice, the music was kind.
Yeah.
Love, happiness.
Yeah.
And today, they stand there and they shout obscenities at each other. This is repairs us for music.
Well, that was one of the brilliant things he did on The Tonight Show, was that he made it a showcase not only for the great standards, and he would have Richard Rodgers and Lerner and Lowe and Sammy Davis Jr. and all these wonderful people there. But he also made it a showcase for jazz. And that was, I think...
In the book, you're Inventing Late Night, the book that you have coming out about,
yes.
is you bringing all that to it?
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. And in fact, not only was he a champion for jazz, and he would bring out all these great jazz artists from Ella Fitzgerald to Count Basie and Duke Ellington. Where are those tapes?
And those tapes were gone, too. Oh, how hard.
It's only about 20 hours, I think.
But thank goodness, Ben got to every single one of the stars that was ever on The Tonight Show before some of them left us.
Oh, how wonderful.
Yeah, in fact, one of the last ones that I was able to get a hold of, one of the guests back in '55, this was Bobby Short.
Oh, my heavens.
I interviewed him in February.
The hotel. What was the hotel he used to always play for years?
Carlisle.
The Carlisle
And I
Hotel,
interviewed him in February, and I can't tell you how shocked I was. I was getting ready to go to work, and I had the radio on in my bathroom, and then there was an announcement made that he just passed away. This is a month after that. After that interview.
Yeah.
Well, it's the same thing with me. I think how many classics people I have. I mean, I've interviewed from Elie Wiesel to Steve Allen to Shimon Peres. I mean, I have interviewed so many people that, I just, these are treasures.
And to have it in a book. You see, people can read. One of the little girls that was editing the book, she told us that she hasn't laughed that long because most of the books that come across her desk aren't that funny.
Well, you don't realize that, like the stories that you've been interviewed, and you've been on so many shows with so many. I'm trying to think. But by the way, you won the American Book Award. What, 5 Emmys you were nominated for?
I guess so. I don't know.
I have them down here somewhere.
Well, this shows you how modest she is. She doesn't keep track of those.
Yeah, you got a bunch of them.
But I tell you, Arlene, Jayne has a great story that she gave me, and I'm sure you recall, about the time when Steve had that local late night show in New York that was adopted by the network as The Tonight Show. But you were telling me about the very first night that the local station in New York, WNBT,
what most people don't know is that there was a man signed to do a show, the show that they had on the air, I can't remember the name of it, but it wasn't doing too well. And NBC was crazy about Steve on What's My Line, and that was always in the top 10, I guess. And
7 years?
Steve was on for, I've forgotten how long.
About a couple of years, I think.
Yeah,
but the show's on 7 years, right?
More than that. I was on I've Got a Secret 7 years and only left it because we had to move to California. But to go back to NBC, wanted to get him to do something. And the man that was to take over this spot came down with, I think it was polio or something, and died 24 hours before he was to go on the air. And somebody said, Steve Allen, I've been telling you, get Steve Allen. And they did. And they said, Steve Allen, what would you like to do? Now, this was just local. This was on a little station in New York, just seen in New England. He said, I'd like to do the show that I did on the radio in Los Angeles, which was such a hit. People would be lined up all the way around the block to just go to his radio show. And they said, what do you need? He said, I just need a theater and a microphone and 2 singers and a few members of the band and an audience. And they said, okay, and how many writers? He said, I don't need writers. I never worked with writers. I had no writers in L.A. Well, the night of the show, I said to Audrey and a bunch of our best friends, there were maybe, 12, 14 of us, let's all go over to the theater and surprise Steve and sit in the audience, And we got there. We went backstage to just say hi, and he couldn't believe it. He said, do you know they've not gotten me an audience? I have no audience. He said, I hope you're all going to stay and just sit out there. So Here was the man who made his name working, playing with audiences. And we did. But in the meantime, somebody came to their senses and sent for, in those days they would bring in truckloads of people, I think they still do, and a busload of old ladies, middle-aged to elderly ladies. They thought, oh dear God, now we've done it again. But he preferred older ladies because he said they don't care anymore. They don't care how they look, you know.
Right.
How will I look on the... They just rattle on like I'm doing now because I'm an old lady. At last, I'm telling my age, Arlene, finally. My real age, I should say. But they came in and they sat down. Don't you dare ask me. No way.
We'll be right back.
I'll whisper to you later. Anyway, he climbed a ladder to get up to the audience because they had given him an old theater that was really originally a radio studio. And you know, they put in the old days the radio studio because you looked down and watched the most fascinating thing.
Like a well, I think,
well, it was the sound man, you see, and they all wanted to see what the sound man was doing. That was his first show, and the only person that was on that show outside of Dwight Hemian, the director, was Steve Lawrence, a little schoolboy from Brooklyn.
So their friendship went all those years.
Oh,
even before that.
Oh,
Steve Lawrence was on.
I didn't know it started way back then.
He was actually on Steve Allen's old radio show prior to that.
Yeah, Stevie was a little high school boy that would take the subway in every afternoon, do the show, and go home at night. And then Edie came later, and then finally Andy. But Steve and Edie are two of my, and Louis Nye and Anita, they're my dearest
Louis Nye,
friends.
actually, I was telling you, I spoke at a synagogue in Portland, Maine last year, and the rabbi that invited me up to speak up there was a cousin of Louis Nye's. And they were trying to find him, and he said, I heard you knew him. I said, yeah, I did an interview. He said, I need to get the number. But he was very interested. I remember I was younger, much younger, watching Louis Nye on those shows.
Louis tells some great stories in the book.
They were hysterical.
Yeah.
Louis and Don Knotts
and Jonathan Winters.
Jonathan Winters did a great interview and had a lot of wonderful memories about Steve and about the show. And they used to take him, Steve always made sure that whenever they took The Tonight Show on the road, and that was one of the first shows to do that, they would be sure to take Jonathan Winters with them, not only because he could entertain very well wherever they were, but because he could entertain on the bus or on the plane to the people around
Robin
the
Williams
crew.
had to be a disciple of his because, they both had...
Oh, he was, and admits it. Oh, yeah.
Oh,
because
absolutely.
it's the same frantic, type.
Worships him.
It's so funny because, it's like we're winding down, which I cannot believe, because I'm still, I have a list. Seriously, I have pages here, and that you work with the greats, the Milton Berles, the Judy Garlands, the Bob Hopes, the Sid Caesars, and people that you just sit there and say, oh, well, no, just my friends, but these are classics. These are people, my God, Judy Garland, and I'm saying the memories you have.
Judy was my best friend.
I know.
And Sid I talk to on the phone from time to time, And
it's really funny. I'm a member of SAG, and they have the conversations.
Oh, next week.
And last night, they had
Sid,
and I was cleared for that. I'm thinking, wait a minute, I can also go to see Clint Eastwood talking about the original Invasion of the Body Snatchers, the Directors Guild. So I went to that, but I said, but I'm cleared to go to see Jay Meadows.
Are you going to next week?
Yes, and I'm thinking, I said, what a wonderful city we live in, that we could actually have the opportunity to do these things.
Yeah.
It's never dull.
You'll see a lot of our friends in the audience.
Really? I'm one of them. So
I know. I'm glad you're there.
And I told them when I was there, I said, I'm so excited. I said that you're even having her come, and I'm going to come see her again.
Yeah.
But it's like, I want to have you. You're so hard to get on here. I have to kidnap you. It's like
I don't do too many.
I know, and it's only because you've got the Inventing Late Night by Ben Alba coming out.
That gets me out.
That
gets me out.
Well, I am honored to be able to sit next to Jane here today.
But either I have to
sit next to you. You've written a magnificent book.
We'll have to
so
get you
much.
back.
A great book. And we didn't tell you that the foreword is written by Jay Leno.
No.
Yes,
really?
it's beautiful. I love Jay Leno so much, and his wife.
Well, speaking...
Woo, what a great woman.
See, I have a book that I wrote. I have a whole chapter in there. I think I sent it. I'm not sure if you ever read it. I wrote on Steve.
No, I haven't.
You don't even know.
You wrote a chapter on Steve, huh?
I did. I have a chapter on Elie Wiesel. I have a chapter on Elvis. I mean, people that, stories, same kind of thing, but stories with my interviews. But my interviews are people like Steve Allen and some of the greats also. And I haven't got an agent, but when I do, you'll come back and we'll talk about my book with Steve and my book and my stories. And you out there, I'm so glad you came on. I don't care. I'm going to get you again, Jayne, because you're just you're too much fun.
Well, the book will be in the bookstores in September.
Well, we don't date anything, because you'll be showing the show 5 years from now, and it's going to be an old one by then.
No.
Bookstores and of course online on Amazon and Barnes & Noble and Borders.
And we're finished. I hate it, because I've got so many other things to talk about with you, but we will come back and we'll run it again. And you out there, folks, keep coming into my show, because it's never dull. Always interesting. And today was a fun one, and I've got so much more to come back. I'm going to get a best of Steve show.
Arlene, it's been a blast. Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you so much for coming on. And wow, it's Arlene Peck. Now the reason.
Thank you.